The marble steps of the Supreme Court gleamed beneath the morning sun, reflecting a brightness that contrasted the heavy tension hanging in the air. Camera crews lined the sidewalk. Reporters with badges flapped in the breeze as they murmured into their microphones, all focused on one man, Tom Holland. He stepped out of the black government-issued car not as a movie star, not as Spider-Man, but as a 28-year-old defendant standing accused of perjury before the highest court in the United States. Tom adjusted the cuffs of his modest gray suit, no designer branding, no Hollywood flair. Just a man, stripped of celebrity, walking into history. He's just a kid actor, a voice from the press line sneered. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Judge Clarence M. Ellison, a no-nonsense constitutional originalist in his late 60s, reviewed the docket with narrowed eyes. Known for his impatience with theatrics and disdain for celebrity culture, he had a reputation for shredding high-profile defendants to pieces in public hearings. Mr. Holland, he began sharply as Tom stood before him, you understand the charges brought against you? Yes, Your Honor, Tom replied, his voice steady. The courtroom watched as the charges were read aloud. Tom was accused of lying under oath in a previous congressional testimony regarding his foundation's usage of federal emergency housing grants. Prosecutors claimed he had knowingly misrepresented how funds were distributed to youth shelters. The headline everyone ran with was simple and brutal: Tom Holland lied to Congress. To the public, it was betrayal. To the legal world, it was a test case in celebrity accountability. But to Tom, it was personal. The judge leaned forward. Do you intend to have your attorney speak for you? No, Your Honor, Tom said quietly. I'll speak for myself. Gasps rippled across the gallery. Very well, Judge Ellison replied dryly. Proceed. Tom stepped forward, unshaken. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a single folded piece of paper, an old copy of the U.S. Constitution, worn at the edges. He unfolded it slowly and placed it on the podium. This is not a prop, he said, eyes lifting toward the judge. This is my defense. The courtroom stilled. I'm not a lawyer. I never claimed to be. But when I testified before Congress, I cited the Emergency Homelessness Act of 1997, Section 12B, which specifically authorizes discretion in reallocation during regional disasters. That clause allowed our foundation to redirect funds to a shelter in Philadelphia after the Baltimore facility became unusable due to structural damage. That was public record. The judge raised an eyebrow. Tom continued. Section 12B was repealed in 2019, but the federal database hadn't updated the citation until after my testimony. I didn't lie. I quoted what was legally listed at the time. He turned the document toward the judge, underlining the clause with a trembling finger. Murmurs broke out in the gallery. One of the assistant prosecutors shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Tom stood taller now. I didn't mislead Congress. I referenced a legal document, officially published by your government, and acted in good faith. If that's criminal, then the law needs a mirror. Judge Ellison stared at the document, then at the young man before him. There was no bravado, no theatrics, only clarity and calm. The judge looked down, lips pursed. Court will reconvene at noon, he said. The gavel fell with a resounding thud. Tom turned from the stand, eyes unflinching, while every camera outside the courtroom waited for a headline. But what they got instead was a question. Who really lies, those who speak, or those who silence inconvenient truths? By the time the courtroom reconvened at noon, the entire country was watching. Every major news outlet had picked up Tom Holland's unusual solo defense. Clips of him calmly referencing the Constitution were already trending under hashtags like #TomVersusTheCourt and #ConstitutionalSpider. But inside the marble pillars of the Supreme Court, the energy was far from digital. It was real, tense, and unfolding with every breath. Judge Ellison entered with the same stone-faced demeanor, but something in his eyes had changed. He now saw not just a defendant, but a mind that had prepared. He adjusted his glasses and signaled for the court to begin. Tom was already standing, hands clasped in front of him, posture straight. He wasn't acting. He wasn't performing. He was simply being heard. The prosecutor, a tall, stern woman named Veronica Steele, approached the podium. Known for her aggressive tactics and zero tolerance for emotional appeals, she narrowed her eyes at Tom. Mr. Holland, she began, even if what you said earlier is accurate, you still distributed funds based on outdated legal material. Isn't that irresponsible at best? Tom didn't flinch. Not when the government's own database reflected that law as current. Would you agree, she pressed, that a man in your position, a public figure, a youth advocate, has an even higher duty to verify legal information? Yes, Tom said. And I did verify it. With whom? She snapped. The HUD Regional Director's Office. I have email records confirming that I requested guidance based on Section 12B and received no correction. He pulled a printed page from his folder, holding it up. Judge Ellison gestured for the document. A bailiff retrieved it and handed it over. The judge scanned it silently. The room waited, holding its collective breath. Steele stepped back, momentarily disarmed. She regrouped. So, Mr. Holland, let's shift. Did your foundation benefit in any way from reallocating those funds to the Philadelphia shelter? Tom blinked, confused. Benefit? You mean, financially? Yes. No. The shelter was about to close. We paid out of pocket to cover the staff salaries until the federal adjustment was approved. There was no personal gain. You expect us to believe, she said, voice rising, that a Hollywood actor voluntarily fronted hundreds of thousands of dollars for a nonprofit? Tom leaned slightly forward. Yes. I do. Because I was once one of those kids. The courtroom froze. I know what it means to sleep on a friend's couch and pretend it's a sleepover. I know what it's like to act cheerful on set, while wondering where you'll be staying next week. So when I saw that shelter collapse, when I saw their funding cut, I acted. He paused, not for effect, but to breathe. I'm not here because I'm a celebrity. I'm here because I refuse to let red tape decide whether kids slept on the street. Silence. Even Steele didn't reply. She simply returned to her seat. Judge Ellison looked up. Your witness, Mr. Holland. Tom walked back to the podium. This time, there was no paper in his hands. Just a voice. He addressed the room, not with anger, but with quiet clarity. There's a belief, he said, that celebrity protects you. But sometimes, it just makes you a bigger target. I'm not above the law. I never wanted to be. But I do believe the law should serve the people. And sometimes, it forgets how. He stepped back. The judge glanced down at the documents in front of him, then back at Tom. We'll hear final arguments tomorrow. The session adjourned. But in the minds of everyone present, something had already shifted. The boy they thought would fall apart had just drawn a line in the sand. And for the first time, the law blinked. Outside the courthouse, a storm had begun, not in the skies, but across media screens. Overnight, Tom Holland's quiet words and constitutional defense were dissected on every channel. Legal experts were divided. Some called it a clever stunt. Others called it the most precise grassroots defense they had seen in a decade. Inside a modest hotel room just blocks away, Tom sat with his palms pressed together. No manager. No attorney. Just a notepad, his phone, and a worn paperback copy of the Constitution he had carried since he was a teenager. Across town, Judge Ellison remained in chambers later than usual. He stared at the email from the HUD regional office. Tom had indeed reached out for legal clarification. No response had been given. And yet, here this young man stood, accused of deliberate deception. The next morning, a different energy filled the courtroom. The gallery was packed, not with celebrities, but with policymakers, lawyers, and curious citizens. It had become more than a trial, it was a referendum on truth in public service. Tom stepped into the room, greeted not by cameras, but by nods. Even Veronica Steele, cold and composed, seemed less confrontational. There was something about Tom's story, his sincerity, that softened even her. Judge Ellison looked directly at him. Mr. Holland, before we proceed with closing arguments, I have a question. Yes, Your Honor. In your testimony, you mentioned you were once in a similar position as the kids your foundation helps. Can you clarify what you meant? Tom took a breath. When I was 16, my father's business collapsed. We lost our home. For several months, we stayed with different friends, rotating nights to avoid wearing out our welcome. My acting jobs continued, but no one knew we were homeless. We hid it well. Murmurs echoed through the courtroom. I told jokes on late-night shows while my mom cried in motel bathrooms. I signed autographs between filming scenes, not knowing if we could afford dinner that night. That's why I created Haven, he glanced at the prosecutor, our foundation. Because no one believed a kid like me could fall through the cracks. The judge remained still, then slowly nodded. Thank you for your honesty. Veronica Steele rose, more carefully now. I have no further questions, Your Honor. A moment of silence followed, broken only by the distant hum of courthouse AC units. Judge Ellison shifted. You may proceed with your closing statement, Mr. Holland. Tom nodded and walked to the podium. He didn't bring notes. He didn't bring anything. What I said may have been flawed. Not because I meant to deceive, but because I trusted the system. I believed the government's official database was up to date. I believed the officials I contacted would respond. They didn't. But I acted, because the kids we served didn't have time to wait. He paused, then looked toward the gallery. This case isn't about me. It's about the standards we set for people trying to help others. If we demand perfection in bureaucratic compliance, we'll scare away everyone willing to do something real. He looked at the judge. I didn't come here to win. I came here to explain. I just hope someone's listening. Then, quietly, he stepped back. Judge Ellison closed the file in front of him. Court is adjourned until the verdict is delivered tomorrow. As the gavel struck, the room didn't exhale, it froze. Because for the first time in a long while, a courtroom had felt not like a battleground, but a mirror. The morning of the verdict arrived with an eerie stillness. Washington, D.C. seemed to hold its breath, as if even the city itself understood the gravity of what was about to unfold. There were no sirens, no honking horns, just silence broken only by the clicking of dress shoes on courthouse steps. Inside the Supreme Court, the tension was unlike any day before. No cameras were allowed inside, but 1,000 lenses waited beyond its doors. Crowds had gathered, some holding signs in support of Tom Holland, others skeptical, but all curious. Tom entered the courtroom wearing the same gray suit. Not out of lack of wardrobe, but by design. He wasn't here to rebrand himself or win public favor, he was here to finish what he started. Judge Ellison sat higher today, somehow more rigid. Beside him, a court clerk handed over the final written opinion. He didn't glance at it. Not yet. Mr. Holland, he began, his voice clear and direct. This court has reviewed all presented materials, communications, and testimonies. The question before us was not your popularity, nor your profession, but your intent and fidelity to federal law. Tom stood motionless. Judge Ellison continued. In determining whether you knowingly gave false information under oath, the court weighed both the legal documents available at the time and your efforts to seek guidance. He paused, a long silence slicing through the room. We find that your actions were consistent with the information available to you. Furthermore, the failure to receive timely clarification from federal sources constitutes a failure of process, not deception. Tom closed his eyes, just for a moment. It wasn't relief. It was release. You are therefore cleared of all perjury charges. Gasps, muffled sobs, and even a single clap broke out before being hushed. Tom's hands, until now folded tightly, slowly relaxed. Judge Ellison, for the first time in this case, looked at him, not as a defendant, but as a man. Mr. Holland, the law is not just ink on paper. It is the spirit with which we carry it forward. Your case reminds us that truth is not always clean, nor easy, but it is necessary. Tom swallowed hard. I suggest, however, the judge added, that you hire legal counsel next time. That got a laugh, even from the gallery. With the case concluded, the courtroom emptied. But Tom didn't rush out. He stood quietly, then walked over to the bailiff and shook his hand. To the clerk. To the court reporter. He thanked each one personally. No cameras. No script. Just Tom. Outside, the crowd had grown. As he stepped through the doors, a wall of reporters surged forward. Microphones extended. Questions flew. But Tom raised one hand, not in silence, but in clarity. I'll speak later, he said. Right now, I just want to call my mom. The crowd parted for him. A block away, sitting on a low stone bench beneath a row of cherry blossoms, Tom took out his phone. He smiled softly as it rang. Hey, he said. It's done. A pause. No, I'm not coming home yet. I think I have more work to do. 3 days after the verdict, Tom Holland stood at the steps of Haven, the very shelter that had nearly closed when funding fell through. The building was still weathered, the paint still chipped, but the lights were on. The children inside were laughing. He had returned not as a celebrity, not even as a cleared man, but as someone who now knew the system he had always trusted wasn't as unshakable as he once believed. Inside, the staff greeted him with hugs and relief. A young boy, no older than 10, clung to Tom's hand and wouldn't let go. You came back, the boy whispered. I promised I would, Tom replied. In a nearby office, Haven's director, Ms. Lourdes Castillo, offered him tea as reporters gathered outside. She turned the television toward him. Every major news station was still replaying his testimony. Analysis after analysis. Debates. Op-eds. Do you want to respond to any of this? She asked. Tom shook his head. I already said everything I needed to say. She nodded. You know they're going to ask you to speak at law schools now, right? He laughed. God help them. A knock on the door interrupted the moment. It was a courier, with a sealed envelope. Tom opened it slowly. It was from the office of Judge Ellison. Inside, a single handwritten note. Thank you for reminding us why the law exists in the first place. Tom stared at it for a moment, his jaw clenched with emotion. He placed the note on the desk and turned back toward the window. Outside, people weren't chanting or protesting. They were simply waiting, looking toward the man who had turned a trial into a conversation about truth, courage, and civic responsibility. That evening, Tom agreed to appear on a live stream, his first public statement since the trial. No suit. No legal references. Just him, in a black hoodie, seated at the edge of a small couch in the shelter's community room. He spoke into the webcam. I didn't come here to be a symbol, he said. But if this experience has taught me anything, it's that the truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers. You just have to listen. He leaned closer. Don't be afraid to act when the system stalls. Don't let red tape decide who gets help. And don't think your voice is too small to matter. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a guy who had to learn how to read the rules to protect people I love. Thousands were watching. Comments flooded in. Some called him naive. Others called him brave. Tom didn't care about either. He just wanted kids to have a place to sleep. As the live stream ended, he walked outside again. The night air was crisp. Somewhere in the distance, someone was humming. He smiled. The courtroom was behind him now. But the work had only just begun. 1 week later, Tom Holland found himself walking the hallways of a prestigious law school in New York City, this time not as a defendant, but as a guest lecturer. The irony wasn't lost on him. He passed framed photos of landmark cases, shelves of leather-bound books, and classrooms filled with students who had memorized the Constitution he had once clung to out of desperation, not curriculum. Inside a large lecture hall, over 200 students waited. Some were curious. Some skeptical. But all were tuned in. This wasn't another celebrity visit, it was something more nuanced. The dean introduced him with cautious warmth. Mr. Holland is not a lawyer, she said. But after last week, many in our field are wondering if perhaps he should be. Laughter rippled through the audience. Tom stepped up to the podium, wearing jeans, a button-down shirt, and no tie. He took a deep breath. I'm not here to teach you the law, he began. I'm here because I had to live it, and it nearly broke me. He spoke plainly, sharing not just the legal aspects of his trial, but the emotional toll, the moments of doubt, the endless nights rereading clauses and footnotes, wondering if he had made a fatal mistake. I wasn't trying to outsmart anyone. I was just trying not to fail the people counting on me. That's what law should be about, right? Protecting people who can't fight for themselves. One student raised her hand. Do you think you would have won if you weren't famous? The room hushed. Tom nodded. Probably not. And that's what scares me. He let that hang in the air. Fame didn't protect me. It spotlighted me. But for every person who watches my video and says, good for him, there are 10 others with no spotlight, no trending hashtag, just a court date and no defense. He continued. What scared me most wasn't losing the case. It was realizing how many ways the system can fail if you don't have the time, money, or voice to push back. The students listened, some leaning forward, others scribbling notes, not just about the case but about the human behind it. After the talk, students gathered around, asking questions, sharing personal stories. One young man said his sister had once been denied assistance at the same shelter Tom had fought to fund. Another said she was inspired to shift her focus from corporate law to civil rights. Tom left the building hours later, his voice nearly gone but his spirit renewed. As he walked down the steps, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Judge Ellison. Heard you made quite an impression at Columbia. You're making a habit of changing rooms, Mr. Holland. He smiled. But the night wasn't over. As he headed toward the subway, a homeless teenager approached him near the corner of 116th Street. Are you, the guy from the trial? Tom nodded. The teen looked down, fidgeting with his sleeves. I've been living out here a while. I saw your video. It made me think maybe, someone like me matters. Tom didn't speak. He took off his scarf and gently handed it to the boy. You do, he said. No cameras. No applause. Just a quiet exchange between two strangers. And in that moment, more than in any courtroom or lecture hall, justice felt real. 2 months after the trial, the Capitol invited Tom Holland to attend a bipartisan panel on social impact initiatives. He wasn't scheduled to speak. Just observe. But as fate would have it, one of the scheduled speakers, an appointed bureaucrat, couldn't make it. And so, Tom was asked to fill in. The room was intimidating: senators, nonprofit leaders, media correspondents, and skeptics who still wondered what a movie star was doing in a policy discussion. Yet when Tom stepped up to the microphone, he didn't posture. He didn't plead. He simply shared. "I'm not here to reinvent government," he said. "I'm here because I was nearly crushed by its silence." He spoke about his trial, yes, but more about the kids at Haven, about broken phone lines and outdated databases, about the simple cruelty of unanswered emails. He didn't blame. He described. And that made all the difference. By the end of the panel, 3 senators had agreed to co-sponsor a new bill proposing rapid response protocols for nonprofits in emergency shelter designation. They called it the Holland provision. The name made Tom laugh. He hadn't set out to inspire policy. He just wanted to keep the lights on. Back in London, as the holidays approached, Tom returned to a quieter life. No film roles. No political fanfare. Just early mornings, tea, and long walks. But something had changed. Not just in him, in how the world saw him. He began receiving letters from law students, public defenders, even sitting judges. Letters that started not with, "Dear Mr. Holland, I'm a fan," but with, "Thank you for reminding me why I do this work." One letter stood out. It was from a woman in Nebraska. She had once been homeless with her son and had nearly lost custody of him due to bureaucratic delays. She wrote, "When I saw you stand there alone, I saw all of us. And for once, someone like us didn't just survive the system. You changed it." Tom folded that letter carefully and placed it in the back of his Constitution. Weeks later, on a rainy Thursday, he visited a small local school where children had created a mural of people they considered real-life heroes. Between portraits of firefighters, doctors, and teachers, one child had painted Tom, standing in a courtroom, holding up a tiny version of the Constitution like a shield. He smiled. And for the first time since the verdict, he let himself feel proud. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with a gavel or a headline. Sometimes it comes with a crayon and a child's belief that the world can still be fair, if someone is brave enough to stand up, even when they're standing alone.